Greetings, one and all. Welcome once more to the Dracovin Empire. Are you ready to dive back into the world of darkness once more? Are you ready to dive into the places of dreams and mysteries with Changeling The Dreaming? If you are, there's another Kith for us to learn about today. I am your host and guide here, Tantus Naravan Dracovin, your navigator through the portal, the gateway through the dreaming into this world so unlike us ours, the world of darkness. A little tip before you take my hand. Subscribe over to me. Let me know your experience with our Kith today, the Slaugh. And I apologize if I mispronounced the name. It does take me a while sometimes. Take my hand. The portal is open. The world of darkness awaits us once more. Because we've arrived. Are you ready to learn? Now, if you wanted mechanical information on how to play a Slaugh, well, there are 2 books. They also do provide deeper dives into the information I will be talking about today. The C20 book, Changeling 20th Anniversary. It is the most update of the basic lore, but any of the core books will have Slaugh in them. And of course, the Slaugh Kith book is not a great place to look. Shall we dive in? Shall we begin? The Slaugh, the Underfolk, the Crawlers. These are names they're given, and they are pariahs amongst many of the Fae kin, the Kith that are out there. There are various rumors that persist about them, that they have underground catacombs, maze-like layers, but many prefer Victorian mansions, dank sewers, dark, forgotten places, mushroom gardens that might be a little bit quite quaint there, inner sanctums that often leave with their perception of nightmares, secrets, mysteries, small treasures. This is what's all about them. Though they are related to the dark and nightmares, it's really the things that are hidden that are much more them. But that reputation that they have, well, not a lot of their actions does much to remove that reputation, to discourage that concepts from those that would visit and encounter them. Let us speak of their origins, where they came from. Because Slaugh, well, they know enough that what they are, their name. They know that death, fear, and pain, things of darkness, are deeply tied to them. They know much of their history, but origins are very important. The exact place where the first Slaugh basically said, "I am," is critical to them. They understand what they are, where they came from, so understanding this is critical to them. Those mysteries, those myths that many other Kith and Kithane tell are not what is important to them. But understanding the past means knowing the future. And while they have the illusions of fright, they do have some myths to themselves. Just a few. So Slaugh, they are creatures of fear. Creatures of the creaking floorboard at night, of the primal forests, of the darkness, the terror of the night. They are the nightmares of these times, the fear, what you dream of when the darkness calls over your eyes. That is Slaugh, the tapping of a window, scuttling of a creature. What's in the shadows? They know they came from this, but the first time that they became Slaugh, where they understood what they are, was not original. They do know that many of the other chimeral creatures and things of the night that are deeply associated with them, and oftentimes connected with them, came about the same way. As they were born of true Kith, there's smaller creatures around them that are connected to them came about in this way. Why? Why fear of the night? Why they receive more pleasure from scream than smile? Why the silent slivering is more enjoyable than art or reputable trades? Why inspiring fear is so important to them? These are questions that will always haunt Slaugh. But the king is, they came to recognize what they were. This is important. They became to recognize that they were Kith. And it wasn't then to the Plow Dudanim, basically connected with the rest of the Kith that existence, they began to understand themselves and the others and these things. And though, even then, maybe perhaps they're a little bit of pride. Maybe perhaps they're just a little something different. Even as the golden age of Kith came about, under the Tuatha De Danann, and especially much parts of the world, Kith began to gain this power, this strength. Europe in particular, of course, we see the great rise of there. And though they would have their connections with many of their Fae, stuff like that, and beginning the legends about them, beginning these connections, they still learned lessons, saw things, existed in this time. Learned their place. We can talk about that place. Theirs is one to represent the fear of the night, to punish those that would resist against it. Perhaps a corrupt innkeeper, a corrupt monk, a child who's misbehaved, who learns to fear the night, who learns to be well behaved at the behest of Slaugh. That fear, perhaps correcting negative behavior, that justice in a way, has become an important part of Slaugh and their culture. But this justice also drove them to the split between more Seelie and Unseelie. For they did start more on the Seelie side, but that need for justice, going from beyond just the small children in the night or parents, things like that, into those that deserved it more. As I said, those that are corrupt and mistreat those that would travel upon the roads, especially during the Middle Ages, is where we see the Unseelie side of things begin to take over, and the Slaugh. An interesting fact that as much as they were connected deep within nightmares and fear, they were Seelie to begin with, and deeply connected with that group. Fascinating thing. Anyway, so let us talk about the Interregnum, the first major things. Now that we have a general idea of the Slaugh and their origins. And that isn't to say there's some more details to that, but keeping it simple today, a little bit. The Interregnum was both good and bad for the Slaugh. That's an important thing that existed. Certainly speaking, being creatures of fear and nightmares, they were always discriminated, in the courts especially. But now, without the Sidhe in charge, without those that would basically keep things in check, they were left alone to those that would now look at them and, well, not look at them favorably. I think that's an important part to look about this. The fact that they now not only had that same discrimination, but they didn't have checks in line anymore. They did not have protections that they once had. An interesting fact about it, that the protections they had from the Sidhe were now gone. And yeah, a lot of impulses and problems, resentment, fear, panicking that set in after the shattering. Much of it was pointed at our good underfolk here, the Slaugh. The Slaugh became the boogeyman, the cause of the shattering, the scapegoat in many ways. Angry mobs. Of course, the freeholds and places like that were never quite a place for them in the first place. So going into the clandestine, far away from the politics, was more and more now being driven away. The angry mobs when they come after them. The power vacuums. Stuff that did not bode well for them. Granted, it was different kinds of abuse now. So that systematic system of abuse towards them was gone. But individuals and smaller areas now existed. And these reasoning and lies, some of them still exist today. They haven't gone away. there are still rumors that persist connected to them. We get to the Industrial Revolution, the 19th century, and these are major changes. I've talked sometimes about how this changed the ways things work, but we must talk about the way things work in a lot of other ways, because as much as these were places of cold iron, of technology, of removing of glamour and stuff, they were also a place that removed dreams and created new fears. Fears that weren't of the dark, fears that were different, conditions that were different, cities that swallowed smoke, vomited forth things, smoke, killed stuff, sweatshops, mines, dreams died in these conditions. The area was foul in cities. Villages were overcrowded, filth, rat-infested areas. The treatment of the countryside, so much was bad. Hey, those children you were punishing. Now they were miners, working in sweatshops. The need of the Slaugh to do their jobs was being replaced. These children couldn't fear. Granted, some of them could still find a way. The children of the rich, those that tormented other children. Yeah, there were still targets there, but it wasn't the same anymore. And many Slaugh in industrialized areas surrendered to banality with all this coming in. Some just surrender. Their punishers of the bad, especially bad children, had been replaced. The terrors of day-to-day were being replaced with new terrors. Basically, the new terrors of day-to-day replaced the terrors that they represented, the lessons that they could learn to children and those that required justice. Their job was being replaced in a lot of ways. But there was more, though, to this, too. It wasn't just as simple as this. The rapid construction of travel, literacy, publishing. Remember, I mentioned the secrets in the night is an important part of the Slaugh. We'll talk about it a little bit here once we finish their history and their ways and means of doing things. But because knowledge and secrets are also an important part of them and their culture, of learning things, spreading that knowledge was important. Slaugh publishers became a thing. There are important authors, Dickens, Scott, Le Fanu, Maturin, that had Slaugh publishers behind them at one time or another, helping push them forward. Spiritualism was born from this. A deep connection to the night and to those old, strange forests, stuff, the dreams and nightmares of the Slaugh that they represent does mean there's a very spiritual aspect of that. And this rise of spiritualism, basically seances and understanding the dead and connections that Slaugh had, also rose. So the Victorian mannerism also struck the dignity, reserve, the courtship, the reactions. All of these things did that too. It resonated highly formal Slaugh, in the Sealy courts especially. And basically this was an age that, as much as many of them suffered, some of them basically blossomed. The Industrial Revolution was such a mixed bag. Now I like this list, and I'm going to share with you the 5 secrets of the Slaugh from this Victorian age. Poe wasn't one, but he should have been. Dickens wasn't one, though we knew several. And the thing is, when sitting on a high tea, he monopolized the conversation, so he was never invited back again. We'll talk about high tea. Contrary to propaganda, Slaugh were instrumental in child labor laws. Yeah, a lot of their coffers went to helping put those in place. For very obvious reasons. They want their job back, god damn it. To put children in line, have them fear the night and understand, things, get them in being good behaved children, someone's got to do it, and it's them, not hard labor. Slaugh love water, but hate sea. That's going to be important in a moment here. But yes, that's an important part. So you'll find a lot of Slaugh at the water's edge, just not on board the boats. They also hate pollution. Things like London's fog were very bad for them. I love these things. These are very interesting little bits here. The last thing to say. Anyway, let's move on. So, we do have to talk about the Resurgence. The Resurgence is deeply connected to coming to America, immigration. And we do have to paint a picture here that the Slaugh weren't a major immigrant on their own. It doesn't mean that Slaugh weren't being born in the New, as they were in the Old. But Slaugh immigrating, very few did. Basically, that traveling across the water that I talked about, yeah, that kind of dissuaded them from traveling across the sea. It wasn't until the 20th century, when the time to cross the sea was very improved, that they felt comfortable with traveling. Slaugh, like the water, hate traveling across it. So basically, we have this birth rate getting into the 1930s, that we start having Slaugh get better numbers closer to the other Kith that are in the New World. But it is a kind of cycle of stuff then, too. Though after, we do have to mention here, because we're going to talk about the Resurgence and the Accordance War in a minute, 5 years after the Accordance War, the number of new Slaugh started rising again. Why? Just some things draw a cycle out of the mortal world, bring out the Slaugh. They saw the Resurgence happen. The Slaugh were prepared. Basically, they saw what was going to happen with the lunar space program. Again, probably the details of it were hazy. But they were like, this is going to mean something. The moon landing is going to do something, mean something. Basically, they tried to tell the other commoners, warn them of the changes. They emerged from their, basically, centuries of being separated out because of the prejudices that happened after during the Interregnum and after the Shattering. And they're like, hey, yeah, this isn't gonna go well. Something's gonna happen. Something big. But no. Their prophecies, projections, they tried to warn them. From now on, those prophecies and projections, when they can use the secrets they know and information they have to predict things, it's kind of keeping it to themselves. No longer will they share that. The slight isn't forgotten. But the Sidae came, and things changed. The Slaugh were ready. Locked behind doors. Hidden. Cantrips at the ready. Ready and prepared for what was to come. I'm sorry, the she. And the she came, and so did war. Most Slaugh, mostly Seelie, buried basically. So, a few token Seelie, Slaugh, basically responded to the she's call for vassalage. Most just stayed out of it. Then the battle happened. The war began after the Night of Iron Knights. And the Unseelie Slaugh basically joined with the battle against the sheep. Todd the Grey, one of the great Slaugh assassins, came out. Became infamous. There were those that joined commoner armies to grant them information, carried messages. A lot of roles that we see the Slaugh in now, jobs that they're known for, came about as a result of this war. But eventually, peace was known. David Ardry, well, sorry, rose to kinghood and made peace. today, well, Slaugh are interested. They're a faction that believes a new spring will come after the winter. Yes, winter is coming, but winter leads to spring. So they want to gather knowledge, gather secrets. They want to ensure the old old stories and tales will survive winter. When spring arrives, the grimoires and diaries that the Slaugh have gathered will hold the secrets that the Fae of the new spring will need in some way. And their memories, even if none of them survive, will live on. They are one of the few Kith to believe that few, if any, of their kind will survive winter. They actually believe that. They're like, we will probably not survive winter. And if we do, it will be very few of us. They understand the days will be ruled by brute strength, not subtlety. And so they see the transfers for them to survive for the new spring incredibly low. It is worst manners to discuss this, the promise of winter, even amongst themselves. And you will only mention it in passing to the use of missiles. But they know that is their cause. They may not survive. Maybe a few of them, at most. But they will bring a legacy to the new age. An interesting position that very few Kith are in. Very interesting thought when it comes to winter. It's a very interesting one. Let's take a look at Slaugh. Talk about them. What they look like. What kind of beings they are. When you look at one, in their Fae mane, their true form, they're slender, pale, they're a little unsettling when they move, as if they have cartilage rather than bone. No teeth, black lips, small, tired-looking eyes. They won't look you in the eye. They stare off at something else. The scent of the grave lingers about them, favoring antique clothing, black, ornate. Many of them are hermits, recluses by nature. They don't fit in even with mortal society, let alone Fae society. They struggle to survive. They'll find employment in bookstores, occult shops, antique dealers. Living in stewards, abandoned buildings. They're shy, territorial. They have their own codes, own etiquette. A lot of times which are unfathomable to other Kith game. Fascinating part about them. They're known, too. Known to others. Their homes, the things that mark them. Books, scrolls, maps, blueprints. Suspiciously sharp letter openers. Candles, whack driven, animal spells, stuffed creatures. Pets that make no sound. Spiderwebs, candelabras. All these things in their things. Many things are not there. Shiny electronics, weapons, armor. Friendly puppies, cats. Gleaming hardwood floors. All those kind of things, not there. They do have roles they found in society. Deals they do. Jobs they do. And of course, occasionally find a little bit of love. We can't forget that. Love is a big part of Fae. And it's fair the Slaugh can find love between them. The pair, well, will have a very interesting wedding. They're monogamous, have a courtship, and an appallingly sentimental wedding. Hamel of Goldgate, a satyr, once said that a Slaugh wedding at once that he preferred them more morose. And when they got happy, it scared him. Then when the pair has come together, they settle one of their warrings, blissfully increasing the combined clutter of both of them. I find that a very fun little tale, that the rare times that they can find a little bit of love. It just means double the clutter. Let us speak of high tea, for it is time to have your high tea. High tea is for Slaugh only. And even the most trusted clients are not privy to some secrets. Business is business. And business is never discussed at high tea. Certainly, a guest to high tea may sometimes interrupting Dickens, but it's very rare, for it is a Slaugh thing, in a lounge or drawing. High tea is a super tea, is an event. Basically, a Slaugh decides they want to have a high tea. They invite dozens of other Slaugh, who respond. The guests arrive. They bear a story, something to add to the feast. In their fey main, which they arrive in, they subsist on weak tea, sour wine, stale cakes, and the like. So it's usual best that others of other Kith are usually not invited to attend. Again, the rarity that a non-Slaugh will arrive. Once you arrive, you are served in crack cups, chip plates. It's not that they're cheap. No, no, no. They're not cheap. That's not the reason to have the crack cups and chip plates. High teas, originally, were usually very expensive at one time. But it's a statement. Decay. Part of the Slaugh and nature. Death, darkness, fear of the night. Fear of what goes bump there. Remember, these are all deeply connected to the Slaugh. Crystal goblets of spiderweb cracks. Hand-fired pottery plates that have cracked edges. Flaking glaze. Premature aging once this is declassing. Don't do that. You want it to truly be aged. Truly. Decay. Telltale. Swapping information. And stories is one of the more important parts of high tea. The second is, of course, to reaffirm your local pecking order with your fellow Slaugh. Check up who's been talking too much, who doesn't know how to set a proper table, and allow them to perform a sort of census of each other. They will often go for months without seeing other Kith, but high tea, even if it's refused, is basically able to check in your fellow Slaugh about what's going on with them without intruding. Perhaps if they say something to you, they can't join your high tea this day, this is why. Or if they can, hey, both allowed to catch up. Let us talk about the professions they take and the true professions they have, in a way. The truth of them. The professions that we see them in, mostly in, of course, our unseelie friends, are the very important jobs, the niches they do in the Kithane society. Of course, assassination. Now, granted, it's a dirty job. An unseelie Slaugh are made for it. Mostly, they are male, with a few disreputable women and the occasional child thrown into the mix to keep things interesting. So you can find a wide variety. Most are for chimerical hits, usually performed with blowguns, stilettos, pioneers, and poison. Very few take cold iron contracts. And they are unsavory even for Slaugh standards. Terrorizers. Once it was their purpose to instill fear, and it isn't completely lost. Many now, it is kind of a profession or hobby to cause a fear in changelings and mortals alike. There are some elite professionals, and the rest are talented, enthusiastic amateurs. So, yes. Couriers. Basically, because even though the straight line between 2 points is a straight line, if there's something in the way, well, Slaugh know the best way to get there, around whatever obstacle. Maybe you have to go to C, D, Q, upside down question mark, and then Z to get to your place. But you'll get there in good time and in perfect confidence. Slithering through pipes, down sewers, is an advantage. And of course, spies. being a Slaugh and having the ability to squeeze into places and not being noticed means you're really good at gaining information. These tend to be their jobs they have. So, Slaugh have a reputation for being liars and slanderers. But they are obsessed with truth. Accurate information is very important. Every informant or trading partner brings a little bit of information to increase the truth they know. Receiving gifts of information is something very useful, even if it's something they can't use themselves. If you try to pass off a falsehood, though, repercussions will be swift. Everything that's known about you will be known. Incidentally, if you infer that a Slaugh is untruthful, nothing will happen. If the same risk made about a Slaugh who is given their word, they are truthful. Non-Slaugh is looked down on a lot more. It's looked down a lot less than fellow Slaugh. There is a little bit of the honor there, not the same way that trolls have. They have no problem lying, shading the truth, or making cryptic statements, or refusing pointed answers. But if they state something as fact and give their word, then that's that. You don't want your information regarded as untrustworthy. It's good economics. Let's talk about their Seemings. So, as childlings, they're street urchins who take very poor care of their appearance. Torn clothing, disheveled, arousing sympathy for suffering. They delight that discuss human children, and their strong affinity for hidden places. As wilders, they guard the uncovered spots in the world. Their skin grows paler, their hair turns darker to black. Their eyes hollow, their fingers and toes elongated. Grumps age at an alarming rate. Their skin hangs loose as if they're too large for them. Their hair soon becomes streaked with gray. Their bodies become warped, stooped, and crooked. They enjoy this. Decay is prized in its many forms, and even decay of themselves is important. Let's talk about their birthrights and their frailties. Squirm. They can dislocate their body and squeeze into places. They can't change their shape or mass, but they can contort to shapes with supernatural ease. Remember those pipes? They can just squeeze in there. As long as there's no deviation for the basic humanoid figure, they can squeeze in there. Some may choose to manifest a grossly swollen head attached to a shrunken doll's body, or dislocate their shoulders, roll them behind their back so they meet. And gross. They also have heightened senses. A little better at seeing things and understanding things. And it's impossible for them to botch stealth or alertness. But frailty is an interesting one. A curse of silence. Where this came upon to them, who knows? But they cannot speak above a whisper. No matter how they strain to be heard. So, they often dislike social situations and are very odd rules of etiquette. Hey, they can't whisper above a... they can't speak above a whisper. So they can't even scream. It's always soft-spoken. A whisper of terror, rather than a shout. When we talk about the courts of the Slaugh, we really talk about the unseelie most. But there's also seelie. But the thing about the Slaugh is, there's no true neutrality. You either seelie or unseelie. No middle ground. But you're probably not going to deal with the formal stuff of your court. Your allegiance is personal, and it's reflected in your actions and thought. But you will have an allegiance, and that is important to the way of Slaugh. One or the other, whatever it is, up to you personally. Unseelie Slaugh are more sociable than the seelie ones. They will make appearances in court and club scenes, have their social lives. Seelie Slaugh do have a contempt for their unseelie kin, who refer to them as shut-ins and such. Unseelies will also engage in a game of whack-a-mole, trying to get a Seelie Slough out of their den, harrying them when they're back inside, and prank them. As far as the Seelie code goes, though, most of them ignore it. Change doesn't matter to them one way or the other as long as they're kept informed what changes are. Glamour may be free, but they rather slither into someone else's stash of dross and liberate it. Passion may come before duty when passion and duty aren't the same, causing fear. The last tenet of the code, honors a lie, carries a weight with Unseelie Slough. They agree with it. For honor's sake, Slaugh have been abused by others, by trolls, sheep, and said nothing. They lost their voices, honored their promises, and for honor's sake, they were spat. Honor's got them. Seelie Slough. They're in the court, but not with it. It's interesting to see that on the Unseelie side of things, well, Slough can be part of the court, be there, involved. But Unseelie, they hold the Seelie code tight as any honor-bound troll. They just don't advise they're doing so. Tend to places of glamour, unobtrusive and quietly, trusting that they only deserve to find these wellsprings. That only deserving will find the wellsprings. They appreciate beauty. Why is a dew-spangled spiderweb as beautiful, any less beautiful than a Monet? They do not engage in public romance, but do have their moments. And they never forget a debt. The Slough never did, one way or the other. Seelie Slough try to avoid their Unseelie cousins. They aware that they're damaging the reputation of them, So they take the high road most of the time. And very few of them ply the professions that the Unseelie have made pretty popular. Spy, terrorizer, assassins. But they do have a kind of shadow war with their Unseelie, involving many of these foods. So, pride, prestige, treasures, and stuff do exist with them. But the battlefields are hidden. There are some unspoken rules, though, in the kind of battles and wars between the Seelie and Unseelie Slough. If you use Cold Iron, it can be used on you. It's self-explanatory. This Shadow War, rarely has real victims. Most victories on the lines of counting a coup from opponents dispatched chimerically. And no one outside the Slough can know about it. A family matter is a family matter. And family matters are never put on display. Not to anybody else. Period. If you speak to an outsider, lover, friend, priest, psychologist, you do not. It is silenced in traditional crawler matter with cold iron. And often, the one whom the secret was spilled is made part of the punishment as well. So those are the two big rules when it comes to the war between Seelie and Unseelie Slough. But there you go. There's the Slough. A fascinating thing. A fascinating member of the courts, too. They are Kith King. They are not a minor thing. In many ways major. Certainly speaking in places like America, the New World, there are far less numbers, though they have grown for years. They have an interesting history. They've always been on the outside, always been kind of abused, looked down upon because of their nature, of creatures of fear, of night, of death, of almost nightmares. The dark creatures in the sewers, with bad rumors about them, bad ideas about them, deep ingrained within their culture, that they don't break. Yes, there are some aspects of their culture that do match with that, certainly speaking, I cannot deny that. But most of the time it is just that, rumors. But the Slough survive and exist. And do their job. Information will be gained. Secrets will be found. And will be kept. And ready. For winter will come. And what is left of this world must be remembered in the new spring. Even if they don't survive. But until then, There's much interesting things to be had. Stuff to learn. And a little hole in the ground that, even if you are a Seelie, don't want to leave it, you can enjoy your little treasures. Signs of decay. But, hey, don't forget, high tea is coming. And I thank you. I thank all of you for joining me today, and I hope you enjoyed this. We'll talk about more Changeling in the future, but until then, please check out the rest of my stuff, whether it's on YouTube or Twitch. Twitch is where I record most of my tabletop stuff. That's live plays like Fall of Abbotsford Wednesdays at 8, but any other of my live plays do end up over on my YouTube side of things. Discussing Tabletop Saturdays at 6, my talk show, discussing podcasty kind of thing. But again, all that tabletop stuff, that's where my YouTube stuff is. I might get a VOD channel eventually, or other kind of channels to expand my content. But for now, you just want to see all the tabletop stuff? Go to YouTube. Please make sure you get that subscription there. Let me know if you've played a Slaugh, or if you'd be interested in playing one after this, in the comments below. Check out my social media for updates and schedule, what's going on, all those kind of things. And until the next time, I bid all of you out there adieu and wonderful farewell.